It's been nearly 14 years since the owner of a Morris County diner was brutally murdered inside his business. Now police think they're getting close, but they're urging members of the public to come forward with more information to help give closure to the victim's wife, children, and grandchildren. Alice Gaynor sat down with the family and investigators in Morris County.
It kind of was the American dream. They never really turned back, didn't have enemies, the opposite. You know, he was very welcoming and generous to anyone that walked through those doors.
Ezzeddine's wife came to the diner when her husband didn't come home, and that's when she made the tragic discovery.
This one will haunt me for a long time, forever.
There is someone out there that did this crime, and we're coming for you.
It's you now, the cameraman.
Yeah, I'm the cameraman.
Chafic Steve Ezzeddine came to the United States from Lebanon in the 1970s in order to marry his wife Amal, since their religious differences were not supported in their town.
I think they were a really good match. You know, they complemented each other well.
He arrived first before calling for her.
Came from a good family and a good start to a career, gave that all up and was working in the restaurant industry and other odds and ends. In Lebanon, had a major in philosophy and theology, so he wanted to continue his studies here, was taking classes at Montclair.
Over time, the couple went from living in a motel to an apartment to a house, raising 3 sons and eventually buying the Kenville Diner off Route 46 in Roxbury Township, New Jersey.
And they really ran the diner together.
His sons, Waleed and Samer, say their father worked 90-hour weeks.
Hardest working man.
Yeah.
It's not possible for a man to work harder.
And he always had time for us.
And I remember just sitting down and watching Pink Panther.
Ezzeddine, they say, also loved peppermint patties, Clint Eastwood movies, and crossword puzzles.
Like in the early 2000s, it was pretty much empty after lunch. And my father would just, he and I would just be sitting at the counter doing a crossword puzzle together. Those are the days I miss.
The one thing that people would not know about him, you know, for a guy who was in a diner for 14 hours a day, he always found opportunities to write poetry. So he was a very intellectual, deep thinker.
I have napkins that he used to write poetry on because he just would grab something whenever it came to mind.
From the mental to the physical, long before he moved to the U.S., his nickname was Steve.
Growing up, he would tell us all these stories about how his friends gave him the nickname Steve because he was so fit that everybody thought he was like Steve Reeves.
Their universe.
Samer says his father's friend tells it a little bit differently.
A bit more of a kind of ribbing, you know, that he was so into working out and push-ups and pull-ups and proving to his friends that he was stronger than they were, that they were like, all right, Steve Reeves, and it stuck.
So there was no misbehaving in your house? Basically.
There was no misbehaving in our house.
There wasn't supposed to be.
The most significant thing about him, they say, his heart. His sons say he'd leave the diner door unlocked even after closing, and if someone came in while he was cleaning up and they didn't have money,
he'd always turn the grill back on, make them a meal, give it to them for free.
During the early evening hours of Saturday, May 28, 2011, Memorial Day weekend, Amal hadn't heard from her husband.
She had gone to church after closing, came home after church, and he was not home. So she went to the diner, and that's when he was discovered. He was stabbed.
Former Roxbury Township Police Lieutenant Adam Del Gercio responded that day.
Can you talk about the murder weapon itself? Was that recovered? It was a knife. From the diner?
Can't get too far into it.
Ezzeddine always closed in the early afternoon on weekends, again, leaving the door unlocked as he cleaned up.
And this happened in daylight?
Yes.
I mean, it was
broad daylight at the time. We believe the incident took place between 5 p.m. and 5:30.
Any signs of a struggle, anything taken?
We do believe robbery was the motive.
He says a minimal amount of money was taken.
Did they have any security cameras in the area at the diner?
There were security cameras in the area.
After the murder, the Morris County Prosecutor's Office released images of 2 people of interest captured on nearby cameras. They're tight-lipped about it now.
Do you have any idea who you're looking for?
We have a person of interest.
Person or persons?
Person.
Was that someone who was recently deemed a person of interest?
I really would prefer not to speculate at this point.
Do you believe Mr. Ezzeddine knew his attacker?
Again, I don't want to speculate further.
Ezzeddine's sons say the diner had regulars.
Was there someone you thought it could have been this customer? It was random? You know, what were your thoughts?
I couldn't and still can't think of who it would be.
I always implored my father to lock the door when he'd be in the back room cleaning up, or just because there was a cash register there. And just, if you're going to be in the back room, lock the front door. But he never did, because he didn't suspect anything of anybody.
Ezzeddine's 3 sons were out of state when their 70-year-old father was killed.
I was shaking. I didn't even believe it.
Sammer was actually out of the country. It was the last day of his honeymoon. He returned home the next day to a flurry of messages on his phone.
And so I called my older brother first. And yeah, I remember his first words, but he's gone.
That's the last day we saw him.
That last day was Sammer's wedding.
I don't think we grew up ever seeing my father really dance all that much, but he, as you can see from the picture, was...
I mean, that was probably the only memory I have of him dancing and like letting loose like that.
I think I in particular love this photo because it also looks like he's waving.
In addition to the grief,
I remember being scared. I mean, our father had just been murdered. I'm sure you've heard this, Alice. Like, it doesn't happen to me, couldn't possibly happen to you. That notion has been dispelled.
the family now checks in on each other frequently throughout the day.
It's truly a senseless crime. All this guy did was work and provide for his family.
For Del Gercio, who recently retired,
But this is my one regret, that I couldn't close this case.
the Morris County Prosecutor's Office, the Morris County Sheriff, and Roxbury Township Police say the investigation has taken them all over the country. The FBI, Secret Service, and other agencies have assisted.
I do believe it's going to be a solve on this case. To the offender, we're not going to sleep. We're going to keep on coming after you. People with information, it's not too late. It's not too late.
The final plea comes from the family who lost a grandfather, father, and husband.
My mother deserves some closure, and the brutality of how it happened it's not right on any level.
The family and Crime Stoppers are offering a reward totaling $50,000 for information that leads to an arrest. If you know anything, call one of the numbers on the screen. In the Kenville section of Roxbury Township, Alice Gaynor, CBS News, New York.
And if you have a cold case that you'd like Alice to look into, you can scan the QR code right there on your screen.